Hi, my name is Alicia. I want to share with you some secret tips to help you speak fluent English. When I was younger, I struggled a lot with English. There were days when I couldn't understand simple words. It felt like I would never learn, and I almost gave up. But then I found some tips that changed everything. I remember a time when I had to speak in front of the class. My hands were shaking, my voice was low, and I felt everyone was staring. I made many mistakes. After the speech, I went home and cried. But the next day, I decided not to give up. I told myself, every mistake is a chance to learn. One tip I discovered was to practice every day. Just like how we eat food to grow strong, we need to practice English to improve. I started talking to myself in English. It felt strange at first, but slowly it became normal. I would look in the mirror and say simple sentences like "Good morning. How are you?" This helped me gain confidence. Another thing that helped was listening. I would listen to English songs, and even though I didn't understand all the words, I liked the sound. Slowly, the words began to make sense. I would sing along, and it felt good to speak the words, even if I wasn't perfect. One song I loved was Imagine by John Lennon. I didn't know the meaning at first, but after listening many times, I understood it better. There was also a time when I met a friend named Lucy. She spoke fluent English, and I felt nervous talking to her. But Lucy told me, "Olivia, don't be afraid of mistakes. Every time you make a mistake, you learn something new." Her words gave me courage. From then on, I would speak English even if I made errors, and each time I became better. Reading also helped me a lot. I started with short stories and children's books because they used simple words. One book one loved was about a little cat trying to find its way home. The words were easy, and after finishing the book, I felt proud. Slowly, I moved to bigger books. Reading made me see how words are used and helped me learn new phrases. Writing is another secret tip. I would write my thoughts in a diary, but in English. Some days I would only write one sentence, like today was sunny, but other days I wrote more. Writing helped me organize my thoughts in English. It was like having a conversation with myself. Another time, I joined an English speaking club. At first, I was very shy. I didn't want to speak because I thought people would laugh at me. But when I finally spoke, everyone clapped. They told me I was brave, and that made me feel so good. After that, I practiced more and more in the club. It became fun to talk to others. Sometimes I would feel frustrated. Learning English wasn't always easy. There were moments when I felt stuck, like I wasn't improving. One day, I sat by the window, watching the rain, feeling sad. But then I remembered a quote I had read: "Every storm will pass." and the sun will shine again. This reminded me that hard times don't last forever. Talking to people was also important. I started chatting with my neighbors and friends in English, even if it was just saying hello or how are you. These small conversations helped me. Every word I spoke made me more confident. I also asked them to correct me when I made mistakes. One day, I was at a store and the cashier spoke to me in English. Normally, I would panic, but this time I smiled and answered. When I left the store, I felt like I was flying. I couldn't believe I had spoken English so easily. It felt like all my practice was paying off. Watching movies also helped. I would choose movies with subtitles so I could read along as the characters spoke. This helped me understand how words are pronounced and how sentences are formed. One movie that helped me a lot was The Lion King. I watched it many times, and each time I learned something new. During my journey, there were people who laughed at me. They told me I would never speak good English. At first, their words hurt. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to say: don't listen to the voices that bring you down. Follow your own path. So I kept going. Their laughter only made me work harder. Another tip is to think in English. At first, I used to think in my native language and then translate to English. This took a long time and made speaking difficult. But then, I started thinking directly in English. If I saw a tree, I would say to myself, "That's a tree," instead of translating. It was hard at first, but with time, it became easier. I also made flashcards with new words. Every day, I would learn 5 new words. I would write the word on one side and its meaning on the other. Before bed, I would look at the cards and test myself. It became like a game, and I enjoyed learning new words this way. One of the most important tips I found was not to rush. Learning English is like planting a seed. You have to water it every day, give it sunlight, and be patient. Slowly, it will grow into a big, strong tree. There were times when I wanted to learn everything quickly, but I learned that taking small steps was better. I remember a time when I was asked to give a speech again. This time, I wasn't as scared as before. I took a deep breath, stood in front of the class, and spoke. I made a few mistakes, but I kept going. When I finished, everyone clapped. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. Another thing that helped me was watching the news in English. Even if I didn't understand everything, I would listen carefully. Over time, I started to understand more and more. Listening to the news helped me learn new words and understand how English is used in real-life situations. There was also a time when I had to write an essay for school. At first, I didn't know how to start. I felt stuck. But then I remembered one of my favorite quotes: "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." So I started writing one sentence at a time. Slowly, the essay came together, and I was proud of what I had written. Talking to myself in English became one of my best practices. When I was alone, I would describe everything I was doing in English. For example, if I was cooking, I would say, "Now I am cutting the vegetables." This simple habit made speaking English feel more natural. One day, I met a person who spoke many languages. I asked him how he learned them all. He smiled and said, "Practice, patience, and love for the language." His words stayed with me. From that day, I tried to love the process of learning English, even when it was hard. I also made friends with people from different countries. We spoke to each other in English because it was the only language we all knew. This helped me practice speaking and listening in a real-world setting. Every conversation taught me something new. Even though I've come a long way, I still make mistakes sometimes. But now I don't feel bad about it. I know that every mistake is a lesson. There was a time when I mispronounced a word in front of a group of people. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I laughed and asked them how to say it correctly. This made me feel more confident, and they were happy to help. As I continued learning, I realized that learning English is not just about knowing the words. It's about understanding the culture, the expressions, and the way people communicate. This made me appreciate the language even more. When I look back at my journey, I feel proud of how far I've come. There were many struggles, but each one made me stronger. The tears, the mistakes, the embarrassment, all of it was worth it because now I can speak English with confidence. But remember, this journey doesn't end. Even now, I'm still learning. Every day brings a new word, a new lesson, and a new challenge. And that's the beauty of it. There's always more to discover. So, my message to you is this: don't give up. Keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. You can do it, just like I did. And one day, you'll look back and realize how far you've come. Thank you for staying with me on this journey. Let's continue exploring the small but powerful steps that will bring you closer to speaking fluent English. One thing I learned early on was the power of questions. I used to be afraid of asking questions because I didn't want to sound silly. But then I realized that questions open doors. Every time I didn't understand something, I would ask. Sometimes I felt shy, but I reminded myself that asking questions is how we grow. I remember one day in class when the teacher explained a difficult grammar rule. Everyone seemed to understand except me. My heart was beating fast, and I was scared to raise my hand, but I did it anyway. I asked, "Can you explain that again?" The teacher smiled and explained it in simpler words. After class, a friend came to me and said, "I'm glad you asked that question, because I didn't understand it either." This showed me that many people have the same doubts, but only a few are brave enough to ask. Learning English also means learning to think in new ways. I used to feel confused about the different ways to express time in English, like when to use "I am going" or "I will go." It felt like a puzzle. One day, I made up a story in my mind where I traveled to different times, past, present, and future. I imagined myself in each time and thought about how I would talk about it. Slowly, it began to make sense. I turned learning into a fun adventure. One more memory I have is from when I first started dreaming in English. It was a strange but exciting feeling. I woke up one morning and realized I had spoken English in my sleep. This made me smile because it showed that English was becoming a natural part of my mind. It wasn't just a language I was learning, it was becoming a part of me. Another tip that helped me a lot was watching cartoons. I know it sounds funny, but cartoons use simple language and they often speak clearly. I watched shows like Tom and Jerry and Dora the Explorer. Even though Tom and Jerry doesn't have much talking, it taught me how actions speak louder than words. Dora the Explorer, on the other hand, helped me learn new words in a fun way. Every time Dora asked a question, I would answer aloud, even though she couldn't hear me. It made me feel more involved. I also started keeping a small notebook with me. Anytime I heard a new word or phrase, I would write it down. Later, I would look it up and learn how to use it. I still have that notebook, and it's filled with words that once felt strange to me, but are now part of my daily speech. Every word in that notebook tells a story of growth. Speaking of stories, I learned that storytelling is one of the best ways to improve your English. I started telling simple stories to myself or to my friends. I would use the new words I learned and try to make the story interesting. Sometimes, I would even make up stories about my own life. For example, instead of just saying, "I went to the park," I would say, "I went to the park and I saw a big dog running after a ball. The dog was so fast that it looked like it was flying." Adding details made the stories fun, and it helped me practice using descriptive words. There was a day when I felt really discouraged. I had been practicing for weeks, but I still made mistakes. I told my friend Lucy, "I'm never going to be perfect at this." She looked at me and said, "Olivia, nobody is perfect, not even native speakers. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is progress." Her words stayed with me. From that day on, I stopped aiming for perfection. Instead, I focused on improving little by little. One of the most emotional moments I had was when I spoke to my grandmother in English. She doesn't speak English, but I wanted to show her what I had learned. I said a few sentences, and even though she didn't understand all of them, she smiled and hugged me. She told me, "I'm proud of you, not because you're speaking English, but because you never gave up." Her words brought tears to my eyes because it reminded me that this journey is about more than just learning a language. It's about persistence and belief in yourself. Another practice that helped me was using English in everyday life. When I went shopping, I would try to read the labels in English. When I saw signs on the street, I would read them aloud. Even when I was cooking, I would read the recipe in English. These small moments added up and helped me feel more comfortable with the language. I also started playing word games. Games like Scrabble or crossword puzzles are great for learning new words. At first, I wasn't very good, but as I played more, I started recognizing patterns in the words. It was a fun way to expand my vocabulary. I also learned the importance of taking breaks. There were times when I studied too much and felt overwhelmed. On those days, I would step away from my books and just relax. I would listen to music, take a walk, or watch a movie. After resting, I would come back with a clear mind, and learning felt easier. One more thing that helped me was speaking with people who were also learning English. We understood each other's struggles, and we encouraged each other. If one of us made a mistake, we didn't laugh instead. We helped correct each other. This made learning feel like a team effort. I also started learning about English-speaking cultures. I would read about holidays, traditions, and daily life in places like the UK, the US, and Australia. Understanding the culture behind the language helped me understand why people say things in certain ways. It made me feel more connected to the language. One day, I watched a video about people who were learning multiple languages. One person said, "The key to learning a language is to fall in love with it." This struck me because I realized that I needed to enjoy the process. After that, I stopped seeing English as something difficult and started seeing it as something beautiful. I found joy in learning new words, understanding sentences, and expressing myself. As time passed, I noticed something amazing. I wasn't just learning English, I was growing as a person. My confidence increased, and I started believing in myself more. The journey of learning English taught me that I could do difficult things if I put my mind to it. Every now and then, I would look back at the beginning of my journey, the days when I could barely say a sentence without stumbling. Now, I could hold conversations, write stories, and express my thoughts in English. It felt like climbing a mountain, and even though the climb was hard, the view from the top was worth it.